I would like to call this Monday, June 29th, 2026, Board of Supervisors meeting, joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what I'll do is I'll open our meeting, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. LaRochelle to open his meeting, and then to Mr. Davis to open his meeting. So, Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members?
Mr. Evelyn?
Here.
Mr. Moyer?
Here.
Ms. Pearson?
Here.
Mr. Steers?
Here.
And Ms. Stewart?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. LaRochelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the absence of Chairman Bennett, I call the June 29th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting in session with the Board of Supervisors and BZA to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Townsend?
Here.
Ms. Johnson? Mr. Moyer? Here. Mr. Dombrowski?
Here.
Ms. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. LaRochelle?
Here.
Dr. Schmidt? Mr. Davis?
Here.
Ms. Rose?
Here.
Reverend Hathaway? Mr. Bennett?
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. LaRochelle. Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Calling to order the New Kent County Board of Zoning Appeals for Monday, June 29th, with a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Ryder, could you please poll the members?
Mr. Frank? Mr. Salmon? Ms. Gardner?
Here.
Mr. Byer? Mr. Davis?
Here. We do not have a quorum for the BZA. However, we would not be voting on any items today.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. All right, the first thing on the agenda today is the zoning and subdivision ordinance update kickoff with Director of Community Development Josh Elragi and Berkeley Group Principal Planner Caroline Van Terve. Is that it? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Elragi.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the respective boards and commissions. As you know, we've been diligently working on getting the zoning and subdivision ordinance update project off the ground. We have not comprehensively updated these development ordinances since the mid-2000s. So we selected Berkeley Group towards the end of 2025 and issued a notice to proceed in the early months of 2026. This project was broken into 3 phases, an investigation phase, which we're nearing the completion of and which Berkeley Group will speak to today, an ordinance development phase, and then the kind of final adoption review phase. This is an 18 to 24 month project, tentatively looking towards the end of 27 for potential adoption. But with that, I would like to introduce Caroline Van Terve and Stephanie with Berkeley Group, and they will run through their presentation and give you an update on where we are.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and Planning Commission and BZA. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I know that it's an extra meeting for the folks down front, and certainly not often that everybody is all together at a work session. So we really appreciate your time and you accommodating us this morning. As staff said, my name is Caroline Van Terve. I'm a principal planner with Berkeley Group. I'm joined today by my colleague, Stephanie Mathina, a senior planner with the Berkeley Group. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey folks, met a couple of you, so it's good to see you again. She got the major stuff, my name. I'm based out of Roanoke, but it's great to be here, so thank you for having us.
Thank you. Welcome.
So before we get started, would just like to give a little bit of background on Berkeley Group and my team for those of you who may not be familiar with us. Berkeley Group is a local government consulting firm based here in Virginia. We exclusively work with the public sector. We do not have any private sector clients, and we love getting to serve local government agencies. Our mission is to partner with those public agencies to strengthen operations, improve outcomes, and support the communities they serve. We were founded out in Harrisonburg about 15 years ago as a planning firm, and planning and community development remain at the heart of what we're doing as a firm. But over the last 15 years, we've expanded our operations quite a bit to touch on all aspects of local government services and operations. So our planners are doing work all across the state. I like to say from the northern neck to northern Virginia, and quite literally everywhere in between. But this is our first time in New Kent, so we are really excited to be here. I'm very excited to get going on this project and work with you all some more over the next 18 to 24 months. Stephanie and I, you'll be seeing a lot of us over the next several years. I'll be the firm's project manager for this effort. Stephanie will be our project lead, and then you'll also be seeing a lot of one of our other senior planners, Tori Haynes. She is local, just down the road in James City County, and she'll be supporting this effort, and you'll be meeting her in the future as well for those of you who have not already. So I do have quite a bit of information to share with you all this morning. I'm going to try and move through it fairly quickly, give you all time to ask questions, share comments. That is what I'm here for. So please, if you do have any questions, concerns, comments, please let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. But today we'll just be going over the zoning and subdivision ordinance, just some background to get us all on the same page as we're getting started with this effort. We'll talk a little bit about the actual update process, the purpose, the goals, what's included, where we're going as far as scope and schedule. And then the bulk of our time together we'll spend going over the results of the zoning and subdivision ordinance diagnostic, as well as the summary of the community engagement that we recently completed. Both of those documents are in your packets. I know they were both pretty lengthy, so we'll be hitting the high points and then having some time to discuss. And then we'll wrap up. I know the board has some other items this morning. So just want to give a quick refresher on the purpose and content of the zoning and subdivision ordinances. Again, just to make sure we're all on the same page as we're getting started with this project, particularly for the subdivision ordinance, since that ordinance in particular is primarily handled by staff, and I know you all don't get as much face time with it. So your comprehensive plan was adopted last year. You've got a brand new plan. And the long-range vision and tactics in your comprehensive plan are what directly inform your zoning and subdivision regulations. So this is a very timely update. Since you've got that brand new plan, we'll be relying on it pretty heavily for guidance and direction as we're drafting the ordinances. So the zoning side of things regulate how land is used and how development should appear, where it should go to best fit the county's character. It also ensures that development is orderly, so you're protecting light, air, your other sensitive natural resources, agricultural lands, tree canopy. It also helps make sure the community can get around conveniently and safely as new development is occurring. Zoning can also facilitate the provision of public services and amenities, like making sure new development can connect to water and sewer, or get appropriate well and septic permits from the health department. And zoning also provides guardrails. It's easy to kind of say that, zoning is just what you can and can't do. It's a little bit more than that. It's helpful to think of zoning as being a set of guardrails to guide development, keep it from imposing negative impacts on property owners, mitigating unintended consequences as much as possible to make sure development is staying on track with your vision. On the other hand, you've got your subdivision ordinance. These regulations are separate but related. Zoning addresses how property in the county can be used, and the subdivision ordinance addresses how that property can either be legally divided or consolidated. So it makes sure that those land divisions are orderly and adhering to minimum requirements. It makes sure that new neighborhoods have the appropriate utilities, roads, vehicular access incorporated in the design. So you can't just put up 50 lots without adequate ingress and egress or water, sewer, electric service. It also establishes the provisions for subdivision plat reviews and recording in accordance with state code. Again, all of that is handled by planning staff. So zoning can designate land into districts. It can regulate how big buildings are, where they can go on the property, how far back they have to be set back from the road. Zoning can require performance standards to limit adverse impacts. Zoning can also protect groundwater, floodplains, tree canopy, agricultural areas, other sensitive resources. It certainly should enhance community character, and it works to support the agricultural, economic, and land use goals that you have established in your comprehensive plan. On the other hand, zoning can't change or correct land use or buildings that are already in existence. Zoning is also not a guarantee that development will occur. So just because a use is addressed in the ordinance, that does not necessarily mean that it is going to be developed. It is just there in the event that it does come to the county or is proposed by a developer or property owner. Zoning also doesn't ensure that land uses will be permanent. Zoning also can't apply rules inconsistently within the same zoning district. All of the properties that are zoned agricultural must be treated the same. All of the properties zoned for a PUD or for industrial must be treated the same. The zoning regulations have to be fair and consistent. Zoning also cannot ensure that property is maintained. That's property maintenance code, separate set of issues. Subdivision can regulate how land is divided and also can require adequate streets, utilities, drainage, and access. Subdivision is also what sets your standards for lots, blocks, and rights-of-way. It helps ensure that new development is coordinated and safe, and it can protect infrastructure and community character. Subdivision can't decide what land uses are permitted. That's a zoning issue. Zoning decides what can be permitted and where. Subdivision also cannot regulate building design or occupancy. And while subdivision ordinances do have provisions to remedy any existing issues with access, property lines, consolidations, those cannot happen automatically. Those issues can be remedied, but there is a process that those issues have to go through, again, administratively with staff, and that's established in the subdivision ordinance. Subdivision can't guarantee that lots will be developed. And subdivision also is not a replacement for zoning, building codes, or private covenants. So for communities in the county that have an HOA or properties that have deed restrictions for whatever reason, subdivision doesn't supersede any of those. Or replace them, I should say. So in short, your comprehensive plan tells us where the community wants to go. The zoning and subdivision ordinances provide the rules for how we get there. And then the development projects show the results of those rules in action. And so this update is therefore a very timely and important opportunity for the county to help demystify some of these land use processes and regulations, improve clarity, modernize standards, and ensure that your future development is more closely reflecting the community's goals. Before I keep going and talk a little bit about schedule and scope, are there any questions so far? All right. So there are 5 main goals of this update process. The first goal is usability and organization. Right now, as it stands, the ordinance is functional. It works, but we have heard a lot from staff, community, developers, you all, about how there are significant improvements that could be made to the structure and the organization to make both the zoning and subdivision ordinances more intuitive to use. And so moving forward, we want the ordinances to be understandable and usable by everyone using them, whether that's a property owner requesting a variance, a farmer who wants to subdivide their lot, or a developer coming in to propose a neighborhood. All of those people should be able to find what they're looking for and understand what they're reading. The second goal of this update, and certainly a major goal of the update, is legal compliance and getting you all caught up with recent land use legislation. So you all are certainly familiar. We just came out of a General Assembly session, and with these annual General Assembly sessions, land use laws in Virginia are constantly changing. That's especially true this year. We saw some pretty big changes coming out of General Assembly. And again, because Virginia is a Dillon's Rule state, if the state enacts a piece of land use legislation and says it's required, you all have to adhere to it, include it in your ordinances. So because everything has changed periodically, we want to make sure that you are fully caught up. That helps protect you all and staff as you're reviewing land use applications, moving through these processes, making recommendations or decisions. The third major goal is clarity and transparency. We'll seek to do that by simplifying language and removing jargon as much as we possibly can, removing any provisions that are redundant or internally conflicting, using more tables, graphics, flowcharts as visual aids to simplify processes, and help explain some of these complex regulations or processes a little bit more simply for the community. And introducing edits for legal compliance is also a big piece of clarity and transparency by making it more clear for the community what's being required by the state as opposed to what may be required just by the county. Certainly, comprehensive plan alignment is a major goal. We've talked a little bit about that already, wanting to be sure that we're marrying your development vision and your development rules as much as we possibly can, because there are several goals and tactics in the comprehensive plan that will only be able to be fully implemented if zoning changes are made first. So that's a big consideration for us. It's also really important that your future development is aligning with what's on your future land use map, whether that's in your hamlets or your industrial areas, and of course, everywhere in between. And last but certainly not least, helping facilitate compatible development. We want to be sure that the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance can be tools that are protecting the county's rural landscapes and agricultural history by directing development to appropriate places, introducing context-sensitive performance standards and design standards, and making sure that the dimensional standards and the location of buildings, things like height, setbacks, lead to development that complements existing communities and doesn't detract or take away from them. I think there we go. Oh, could you go back one slide, please? Thank you. So as staff mentioned earlier, this is a three-phased process, and even though this is the first time that we are formally meeting with you all, there has been a lot of work going on in the background over the last several months. The investigation phase is where we have been. We kicked off this project internally with county staff earlier this spring, and then got right to work on the diagnostic report that you have in your packets, as well as community engagement. And that brings us to today. Today kind of formally wraps up the investigation phase. We're meeting with you all to kick off the project, answer your questions, and then we'll also be going on some site visits with county staff after this. And then immediately moving forward, we'll be moving into ordinance drafting. This will take us until spring, early summer of 2027. So this will be the bulk of the process. It will be about a year long. And this ordinance drafting phase will be split kind of roughly into two parts. So the first part will be just taking a look at reformatting, reorganization, and state code edits. The next time we see you, we won't have any new language unless it relates to state code. We'll basically just be taking your current ordinance language, reformatting it, reorganizing it into the style and the format that Berkeley Group would recommend. So that way you can see, the reorganized piece, get familiar with where things might be. We can also kind of show you and identify where there might be gaps between what Berkeley Group would recommend as a policy change or an addition and where the ordinance might be now. Of course, state code edits will be a big piece of this as well. So we'll bring that to you later this fall. And after we are good on the format, organization, state code edits, then we will actually move into policy and content changes. We'll be able to redline the document, make additions, introduce some new graphics, and then we will work with you on the updated draft and policy changes through a series of joint work sessions throughout next year. I should say, too, that the goal here is not to completely throw everything out and start over. If something is working now, we want to retain it. We have heard some positives and strengths about the current ordinance, both from staff and the community. And so if something is working for the county, we do want to keep it. But again, making sure that we're achieving those project goals, making edits, or introducing new provisions where we may need to. So after all of that, we'll move into the third phase late next summer, reviewing and refining. There will be a second formal community engagement and public review period. We will have at least one open house for the community to come, learn more about the draft ordinance, speak with us, staff, have their questions answered. And then before we move this forward through the public hearing process, we'll have one final joint work session with you all to review the results of community engagement, answer any final questions, incorporate any final edits, so that way you all are comfortable with moving things forward through public hearings. So assuming all goes to plan, we anticipate public hearings in the fall of 2027. After the ordinance is adopted, we'll also be working with county staff to update the development forms and applications so that when the new ordinance becomes effective, the implementation process is as seamless as it can be for staff and for applicants. This is a little bit more detailed of a breakdown on where we're going for the second phase. So again, we anticipate coming back here to meet with you all in November to review the updated structure and reorganized updates, go over some of the major state code changes that you need to be aware of, and then we'll begin an initial policy discussion. And then those 5 work sessions that we'll have tentatively beginning in February of 2027, we will be reviewing an article or 2 of the ordinance at a time. So the goal with these work sessions is, moving forward, is to have less of us talking and more of an open dialogue with you all about, your concerns, priorities, what you like, what we got right, what might need to change. We want this to be as transparent and a collaborative of a process as possible. We don't want to draft a 300-page document and give it to you the first time at a public hearing. That would not be good for a lot of reasons. And so we want to give things to you periodically. Certainly all of these will be held at open work sessions, so open to the community, and we'll have that dialogue, an iterative process as we move through the ordinance. So again, you'll see a full reorganized ordinance in the fall, and then from that point on, we'll be giving you articles a little bit at a time with red lines and policy changes. And then again, we'll have that one final work session next fall to go over the full ordinance in its entirety, go over community feedback, have some more discussion and refinement before public hearings. Before we keep moving on, are there any questions about the project schedule, scope, goals? All right, I know I'm giving you a lot of information, so just want to be sure that we're all good moving forward. So now we will take a look at the zoning and subdivision ordinance diagnostic, which you all received in your packets. This is a very lengthy document, and so for the sake of time today, I'm just going to hit the high points, but would recommend that you all read through it if you haven't already. There's a lot of good information in there, and the recommendations and the findings that we identified through the diagnostic, we will continue to refer to, along with preliminary community engagement as we draft. So if there's anything in there that you have questions about or would like to know our thought process on, please let us know today and we can go into a little bit more detail about that. So the diagnostic report, you can think of it as a code audit or a report card of your existing ordinances. Before we got started with drafting, we looked at the zoning and subdivision ordinances in their entirety to identify, in our professional opinion, what is working and what is not, where we see revisions, or where we see things to keep, things that may be working well that we would like to retain. And so the purpose was really to first analyze the zoning and subdivision ordinances for compliance with state code. And that includes any new state code requirements that came out of the General Assembly this year and their applicability to the county. Providing recommendations to align with current planning best practices. There are a lot of best practices and considerations for the ordinance that might come from the comprehensive plan or just good, sound, ethical land use practice in general that may not be addressed through state code. And so we wanted to address those as well through the report. And then certainly identifying opportunities to implement your comprehensive plan. So we'll first take a look at the zoning ordinance's compliance with the Code of Virginia. The Code of Virginia has a section in it that basically addresses planning, land use, zoning ordinances, subdivision ordinances. And so we went line by line through those state code provisions, compared them to your zoning ordinance, and that was the basis of our state code analysis and serves as the 3 pie charts that you're going to see on your screen in a second. So this first chart on your screen shows the percentage of state code provisions that are mandatory for inclusion, optional for inclusion, or not applicable to New Kent County, maybe because it applies only to certain regions like Hampton Roads or Northern Virginia, or sometimes there are state code provisions that only apply to larger localities above a certain population. and therefore wouldn't apply to New Kent County. And so 57% of those are mandatory for inclusion, about a quarter are optional, and then 18%, again, don't apply to the county for whatever the reason may be. So the second chart on your screen is the one to pay attention to. This one is the most important. This chart shows the percentage of the mandatory provisions that, based on our analysis, are fully, partially, or not included in the ordinance. So as you can see here, this green piece, about 43% of those mandatory provisions are fully included. The ordinance complies. You have 21% of those mandatory provisions that are partially included, and then 36% of those mandatory provisions that are not included. The current ordinance does not comply. So together, there's about 64% of those mandatory provisions that are at least partially included. That gives us a pretty good foundation to build up from. A lot of this 36%, these mandatory provisions that aren't included, those are the new pieces of legislation from this year's General Assembly session that were either brand new or existing pieces of legislation that were amended. We just wanted to give a pretty honest assessment moving forward to make sure that we weren't overlooking those new state code items that came out of this spring. And then this third chart shows the percentage of optional inclusions that are fully, partially, or not included in the ordinance. So again, this green piece here, about 29% of those optional provisions are included, 8% are partially included, and then 63% are not included. I would not worry as much about the optional provisions. We kind of go through those on a case-by-case basis, both internally as Berkeley Group and with county staff, to see what might be appropriate for New Kent County. There are some optional provisions of state code that are really only appropriate for larger localities and metropolitan areas, or for whatever reason we would not recommend for the county. And so don't worry too much about this big red piece. We'll be kind of taking a look at that moving forward to see what's actually going to be good for the county to include. So on the next few slides, just highlighting some of the general recommendations that Berkeley Group highlighted in the diagnostic and what we anticipate the result to be. So certainly incorporating current Code of Virginia references and addressing recent amendments. There are some places in your code where the references to state code are outdated or obsolete. Those need to be fixed, both to help you all, but also to help the community as well. This helps improve transparency for the community, protects you all in the event of legal challenges, and it also makes sure that the code is being applied fairly and consistently, cutting back on decision-making that could be alleged to be arbitrary or inconsistent. Again, seeking to streamline the ordinance wherever possible, avoiding jargon, using lists or tables where we can in lieu of big chunks of paragraphs, incorporating more graphics and flowcharts. This helps improve readability, reduces the number of interpretations that may be needed by staff, and helps expedite the process of making future text amendments. This third line here is an optional provision of state code. It is not required, but Berkeley Group always recommends introducing civil penalties as a first line of defense. Right now, for violations of the ordinance, those are penalized as misdemeanors. That eats up quite a bit of time and money for the county to go to court. A lot of times, too, when those court cases do happen, they oftentimes will get thrown out. The judge will say, there's bigger fish to fry. I'm not concerned with the zoning issue. And so that often leaves no real remedy if there is a real violation of the ordinance. So this is certainly one that we will talk about further moving forward. But again, we recommend this to, have some consistent civil fines, prevent the misdemeanors. This, again, eases enforcement burden, saves the county time and money on court costs, and it allows the county to put the most effort towards serious or repeat violations rather than just maybe one-off minor occurrences. Something else that we'll be taking a look at is identifying the best enabling legislation for proffers moving forward. New Kent County is considered under state code to be a high-growth locality, And so that just unlocks some additional considerations for proffers. And so we want to be sure that if a developer is coming in and voluntarily offering proffers, that those are going to be as beneficial to the county as possible. There's some different enabling legislation that the county can choose to act under. And so we'll kind of take a look at that in conjunction with staff and the county attorney, just to be sure that you all have the maximum amount of flexibility possible to address unique challenges and mitigate impacts. We've also recommended rewriting the purpose and intent statements of all zoning district. So each zoning district in the county has a purpose statement that basically just says, this is what we envision in the agricultural or the industrial zoning district. Right now, those statements are very vague. They're not very helpful, and they're not always in line with your comprehensive plan. So we've recommended rewriting those, as well as potentially identifying districts that could either be added or potentially phased out. Again, promoting alignment with the comp plan, improving clarity and transparency for the community, and offering you all with some additional rationale for your discretionary decision-making. Continue using the table of uses. There's a use matrix right now that identifies all of the permitted uses in the county and where they're permitted. This is a best practice that Berkeley Group already recommends, so we would absolutely recommend continuing that. However, the use names need to be updated for modernity. There's some really outdated uses in there, especially industrial uses, and introducing uses as may be appropriate given your comprehensive plan. So again, this also helps to advance the goal of a user-friendly ordinance, allows you all to appropriately regulate emerging uses, and can also help advance the county's economic development goals. And then last but not least, reviewing and updating performance standards for all uses. These are kind of the extra set of regulations that apply above and beyond to specific uses to help address unique impacts, safety, traffic, noise, light, dust, what have you. This can also help promote alignment with the comp plan and reduce conflicts between potentially incompatible uses. Again, we want to think about those guardrails, keeping the county business friendly and working to achieve its goals, but also maintaining appropriate safeguards. There are more recommendations that pertain to zoning. Again, for sake of time, just kind of hitting the high points here. So that brings us to the subdivision ordinance. Like zoning, there's a series of state laws that are required for inclusion in the subdivision ordinance. So I've got the series of 3 pie charts here on your screen again. This first chart again shows the percentage of the percentage of provisions that are either mandatory for inclusion, optional, or again, do not apply to New Kent County for whatever reason. You'll see that about 60% of those provisions are mandatory, 22 are optional, 19%, again, don't apply, whatever the reason may be, don't need to worry about it. Chart 2, again, is the most important one you'll see on your screen. Again, this shows the percentage of mandatory provisions that are fully, partially, or not included of the subdivision ordinance. So you'll see here in the green, about half of those mandatory provisions are included in the subdivision ordinance. The ordinance complies. And then we've got about a quarter each of mandatory provisions that either are partially or not included. I'll say that this is better than a lot of subdivision ordinances that we see. A lot of subdivision ordinances that we see have never been updated. And so this is actually comparatively in pretty good shape, again, giving us a good foundation to start working from to achieve that legal compliance goal. And then again, the third chart shows the percentage of optional provisions that are fully, partially, or not included. You can see in the green about 44% of those optional provisions are included, 6% are partially included, and then about half are not included. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about that red piece. Those optional provisions we'll just kind of go through on a case-by-case basis with staff and the attorney to see what may be appropriate. You'll see here that a lot of our recommendations for the subdivision ordinance are the same as what we've recommended for the zoning ordinance. And I'll say too that moving forward, we do anticipate combining the two separate ordinances into one chapter of the Land Development Code to promote consistency and reduce some of the internally conflicting provisions where we might have them now. And so that's why I've highlighted some of the similar ones, just to show you where we're thinking about some of the same things and where we'll be addressing everything simultaneously. So again, getting you all caught up where we need to with state code. I don't believe there were any amendments that were subdivision related that came out of the General Assembly this year. I believe there was one optional one, but regardless, getting you caught up with state code where we need to. Again, streamlining the ordinance. A lot of our recommendations for the subdivision ordinance actually related to reorganization and structure. I think you will see that that will go a very long way in easing use of your ordinance moving forward. Again, using graphics here where we can, avoiding jargon, anything we can do to make the ordinance more readable for everybody involved. Clarifying standards and processes for waivers and modifications to the subdivision ordinance. There are some waiver and modification processes now that are included in the subdivision ordinance. However, they're not clear, they're inconsistent, and so we do need to do a little bit of cleanup with that. There's some state code that speaks to that, but this also prevents any loopholes and promotes consistent enforcement in the subdivision ordinance. We'd also recommend introducing an exception process to the subdivision ordinance. That process is very similar to the variance process that you may be familiar with zoning. Right now, there are hardship circumstances is related to subdivision, and there's not a clear relief process for those. And so staff would like to be able to help property owners out, align with state code, and provide property owners with additional relief avenues in defined hardship circumstances. Again, that wouldn't be to replace the waivers and the modifications, but to work together with them to provide some different avenues for relief where need be. This also helps improve clarity and transparency in administration. So that wraps up the state code piece of the diagnostic. We would be remiss to overlook your comprehensive plan from the start of the process. And so we included a matrix in the report identifying the tactics in the comprehensive plan that would directly be implemented through the zoning and subdivision ordinances. And we just made some recommendations, put in some ideas for how they could potentially be addressed. So again, at this point, these are recommendations. We won't be getting into concrete changes until next year, but wanted to go ahead and give them to you all up front so you can begin thinking about them, see if there are any major questions, burning comments. But you'll see that the matrix in the report too doesn't include all of the tactics in the comprehensive plan. And that's simply because not every comprehensive plan strategy or policy item is zoning related. There are other areas of the county where those goals are certainly important to implement, but they're not zoning related. So we just kind of picked out the important ones. One of the major goals of the comp plan, and certainly something that we've heard throughout community engagement, is encouraging housing development and housing facilities that allow older residents in the county to age in place, to continue living their lives here as they grow older. Again, recommended improvements, improving or updating accessory dwelling unit permissions in appropriate residential districts to support multi-generational living arrangements. There was also some state code legislation related to this that came out of this year's General Assembly session. So that actually works really nicely with this goal in the comp plan. Again, this is another item that's also tied to state code, introducing a use for continuing care retirement community, which is a little bit different than some of the older or other residential uses that they have now. Again, continuing care for older adults that kind of provides progressive living options all in one development. That's not currently explicitly permitted in the county. Requiring development to follow guidelines to mitigate stormwater runoff and preventing pollution from reaching waterways. Considering a bonus point system for cluster development or other types of residential development where additional units may be allowed if certain environmental benefits are included by the developer as part of the development. and introducing a maximum requirement for impervious lot coverage in commercial and industrial districts. Again, just recommendations at this point. We'll be getting more into this in the coming months. One of the goals of the comp plan was to ensure the timely completion of proposed commercial uses and any future planned unit development. So if you have a PUD with both residential and commercial uses, you don't have these strip malls that are coming up and sitting vacant for forever. I mean, nobody wants that. And so one of the goals of the comp plan was to make sure that if a commercial use is proposed, it's being completed in a timely manner. So introducing construction phasing requirements could be a solution. Establishing a maximum allowable percentage of commercial development could be another solution. And then promoting increased densities or mixed uses where public utilities are available was also highlighted in the comprehensive plan, going so far as to require 2 different types of residential housing types and PUDs. A lot of times, given market conditions, a developer is doing that anyway. Thinking about, is there a need to actually require 2 different housing types? Introducing additional housing types in appropriate districts, and then introducing some development and performance standards that are specific to any mixed-use structures. So to summarize the report, we have identified some priority items in no particular order, but to just give you all a sense of what we'll be looking at. Again, integrating the required Code of Virginia items, as well as optional provisions on a case-by-case basis, consolidating the zoning and subdivision ordinances into a single chapter of the Land Development Code, consolidating, cleaning up, clarifying your community design standards to address things like landscaping, lighting, etc., reviewing and updating all permitting and application procedures for clarity and alignment with state code where needed, and then updating the standards for cluster development and planned unit developments to improve the balance between agricultural character and residential growth. Before we move on, are there any questions about the diagnostic report? Any comments, thoughts about what you've seen or heard so far?
Mr.
Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I could wait until the end, but I just want to be sure that at the end of all of this, there's going to be a document that is marked up that shows explicitly what all the changes are that the public can view. Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. So the first part, again, will be that reorganization, and we've begun work on that now. We're basically just taking all of your existing text and reformatting it. So in November, there won't be a red line. That's only because there won't be any new language at that point. The only new language will be state code, and that will be highlighted. We'll actually go so far as to highlight that in the document so it's clear. And then when we begin to draft the articles at the beginning of next year and actually begin to work on the actual policy changes, then there will be a red line. We will post those draft documents on the website. We're working to think about an additional survey opportunity or a comment platform where as we draft the articles and have them redlined, we'll post them to the website so that the community will be able to read them as we're drafting them and have some form or way to comment on them. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Mr. Ventura, I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
sir.
My dealing with ordinances is the terminology was shall and may. Are those still, like, if it says may, then the county has the option to may or may not adopt it. But if it says shall, we have no choice. Is that still correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And in the diagnostic report, there are 2 appendices, Appendix A and Appendix B. Those are matrices, and each state code provision is highlighted in each row. And there's basically a summary that says whether it's a shall or a may. So that's highlighted there as well. And then that interpretation certainly applies to the county's actual zoning ordinance. If something in the zoning ordinance is a shall, then it's a has to. But if it's a may, then that's a little bit different.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. It sure does. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
I assume that it'll be color-coded differently if it's something that's optional and something that's mandatory. If you're going to recommend something that's optional, we would want to make sure that,
Very good point.
that we can change that if we don't like it.
Yes, we'll have a couple of different ways as we draft to kind of track things. So the matrix in the diagnostic report, there is a column that highlights it. We have also color-coded in that matrix all of the new or amended pieces. So it's very easy to tell what is new and what you may not be familiar with. And then once we move forward in the draft documents, we will be highlighting things with different colors. We will have footnotes. We'll have red lines. We'll be putting together what's called a changes matrix to kind of show the difference between your old ordinance and your new ordinance. So we'll try to put together as many different tools and aids as we can to help track what's required, what's not, what's changing, what's not, what's been retained, and so on.
Well, I did notice that one of the comments was that our zoning ordinance is very difficult to read. Most people were not happy with that. So I would encourage you to make it easier to read and understand the changes as well. So
Yes, ma'am. That's a major goal. We have heard a lot of that, even from some of the development community as well, wanting more transparency and improved readability. Hopefully, we'll improve language, add in some aids to help track changes, graphics, flow charts, tables, wherever we can make an improvement, we'll try to do so.
And just one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we directed staff at the last regular meeting to draft a data center ordinance. Are you going to give feedback on that as well in conjunction with this process, or will that just be completely separate from this and then included in this in the end?
Yeah, I'll defer to staff. My understanding with where the TOD is so far is that that's separate and will be addressed separately from the ordinance, but I'll defer to staff if you have any updates on that.
And this is separate from the TOD.
Yes, this is separate from the TOD.
I mean, the data center ordinance is separate from the TOD.
Yes,
So-
the intent is to take the direction that was given at the prior regular meeting of the board and draft a version of the data center ordinance and bring that forward for discussion, refinement, and all that stuff before moving forward. But we ultimately want to keep that separate from this overall process because there's a lot more that goes on in the county than just data centers. I know that's the hot topic right now. But we want to keep Berkeley Group focused on the overall rewrite while staff handles the data center ordinance. If that ends up being adopted at some point prior to this process being done, then it would be incorporated in the new ordinance, in the new overall ordinance. But yes, we do intend to
But
keep
it may
that
be
separate.
good for them to review it so that we know that we're within state guidelines as well, so that it complies.
Absolutely. We can share that with them. We also can share that with the county attorney to make sure that we are in legal compliance with anything that's proposed.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, will
Yes.
this presentation be posted online for the public? This PowerPoint, will this be posted on the planning department website?
Yes, sir, it will be. There is a project website, www.tinyurl/blueprintnk. And I do have that on a later slide, so don't feel like you have to rush to write it down. But we've been posting everything so far on that project website. There are links to the ordinances. There is a link to today's agenda packet. The presentation that was given at the public workshop was posted. Everything that we've done to date is on that website. And we will continue to update that website as we move forward. So this presentation will be uploaded after today as we draft the ordinance, all of the drafts, all presentations, any memos, meeting materials that we are providing to staff or to you all of that is going to be posted on the project website. We've also got a few other good resources up there now. There's an FAQ, there's a video, there's a little bit more information and background about the process. So that we want to be as transparent as possible, and we want everything to be out in the open as we're developing it. And so that project website will continue to be live with the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have issues with some of the way the verbiage is in some of our ordinances. But as I have read a lot of the ordinances, you'll read one ordinance, but you don't realize that that ordinance is linked to another ordinance. Will you be able to connect what else is, maybe there's an exception here in this ordinance, so let's look at this ordinance because it will actually combine?
Yes, ma'am. That's something that we flagged and something that we will be able to do. We were looking at that the other day. So a good example of that is there are a couple of standards that refer to the Chesapeake Bay ordinance, but it's very vague. And so we plan to add those specific section references in the ordinance document. And then once the county uploads that into Municode at a future date, which is the online platform where the ordinance is, there will be a hyperlink there. So if someone is reading the text, they could just click on that and see both the specific section number and then go immediately to that code section. We also just want to work to clean up any redundancies that are existing currently. So for example, there are some terms in the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance that are defined multiple times. The term is used in both ordinances, but they have multiple definitions. For example, street, I believe, is defined 3 different times between the 2 ordinances with 3 different definitions. And so that is certainly counteractive to usability. And so that's, again, something we'll be looking at and cleaning up in addition to the cross-references, specific section references, adding tables. So that will be a big goal of the update. And you'll see a little bit more of that in the fall, and we'll get more into that in the spring. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I'd be more than happy to show you another issue where I've come across that might want to have your attention looked at.
That would be great. Yeah, if you have a specific example with you, or if you'd like to send that to county staff, and they can pass it along to us, and we can follow up with you to talk through that if we need to. Any other questions about the diagnostic or organization, state code? All right, the last major item I have for you today is community engagement. And so I know that several of you stopped by one of our events this spring or participated in one way or the other. So thank you very much for doing that. We certainly enjoyed getting out there and getting to meet community members and hearing their perspectives. So again, I'll just be going over the findings at a high level. In your packets, you have a community engagement summary that gives a very detailed overview of those findings. This is also posted on the project website for anyone to read and take a look at. So it's really important to us that we engage the community at the outset of the project, so that way we had their perspectives and opinions in mind as we are drafting and can regularly refer to their feedback as we go on. This also gave us the chance to answer questions, spread awareness, and just hear some current needs and priorities to make sure that the updated ordinances are indeed reflective of the community. So we had 4 types of engagement opportunities: a community-wide survey, an in-person and virtual workshop, 4 focus groups, and 2 pop-ups or intercept events at the farmers market. Again, these are summarized at length in your packets. So we heard some different perspectives and priorities from different community members across engagement. But these were what we identified as the 4 key themes or priorities that were consistent across all forms of engagement. So preserving rural character, introducing design standards that promote high quality development while remaining context sensitive and area specific, carefully consider how the scale and intensity of new development may impact utility and transportation infrastructure, and maintaining transparency, predictability, and consistency in review and permitting processes. So I'll just start by quickly going over what we heard from the farmers market pop-ups. We held 2 of these on May 16th and 30th. These were informal, interactive boards for folks to complete. And a lot of people who put stickers on the boards or wrote a Post-it note also lingered and talked to us for a little bit So it was great to meet them, answer their questions as well. And so this is what we call the this or that board. And so participants were asked to respond to a series of contrasting approaches, each related to a different topic or planning element based on their preference for New Kent County. In reality, it's not going to be all or nothing. There is going to be a mix of these things. But the goal here is to get folks thinking about trade-offs so we have some sense of priority. So you can see the first row was about housing. People were very divided on housing. You can see that there's almost an even split between allowing more housing types to give community members more options and keeping most areas single family. So a pretty split opinion here on that from the folks who filled out the board. Here, though, there is a more clear majority. Most folks said maintaining or increasing commercial parking requirements to avoid spillover. This third row was about trees and landscaping. Again, very clear majority here. The preference was to require more trees and landscaping to improve appearance and increase shade. Same with this row, pretty clear priority, requiring larger buffers between uses to reduce noise and visual impacts. And then this last row, you can see there was overwhelming consensus to have the Board of Supervisors approve more development on a case-by-case basis. The second board of the farmers market we referred to as development priorities. And this activity asked participants to identify where various development or community design practices should be emphasized throughout the county based on the categories that you have on your future land use map. So preserving open space, most people said this should happen in rural areas, although you can see here, there were quite a few people that said this should apply county-wide and not just in any one specific area. Promoting a variety of housing types, you can see, again, some split opinions on where folks thought that should happen. Most people said that should happen in your villages or your hamlets and residential areas. Again, some overwhelming consensus around where environmentally friendly designs should be encouraged, that county-wide. Mixed-use neighborhoods, most people said those should be in villages. Landscaping, environmentally friendly design seems to be the pretty clear theme across this form of engagement. Most people said that should occur county-wide. And then similarly with corridor design as well, requiring high-quality design along major roadways. Again, most folks who filled this out said it should occur county-wide. And then last but not least, we had an open-ended activity that asked participants to share what types of development, design features, or community improvements they would like to see either more of or less of in the county. I'm not going to read all of these, but I will highlight some of what we heard the most of. We heard several people say that they would like to see more grocery stores in the county. That was repeated 7 times. Some variation of more local restaurants, more options for restaurants, more options for commercial and shopping. We also had some folks repeat open space and small businesses as things they would like to see more of in the county moving forward. And then that takes us to what folks would like to see less of. There was here, no data centers was repeated 17 times. Food lions was repeated twice. So folks, I guess those 2 folks want to see less food lions, and then subdivisions as well was also cited on this side. And then quite a few other opinions as well. Again, won't read all of those for sake of time, but those are in your packets. We just wrote them down verbatim from the sticky notes. So next we have the community survey, and this was the engagement opportunity that received the most interest and participation. The survey was available for around a month and a half and promoted pretty widely. There was a mass mailer sent out. We gave the survey link to all of our focus group and workshop participants. We handed out quite a few postcards at the pop-ups. And so in total, we had 741 responses to the survey. Taking a look at who was taking the survey, 94% of survey respondents identified as residents. Most are property owners. So you can see 66% said they live and own property in the county. 59% have lived in the county at least 10 years. 18% have lived in the county for under 5 years. So the majority of folks taking this were longer-term residents, but again, some pretty strong representation from newer community members as well. Only 2% of survey respondents self-identified as developers or a similar industry professional. We did have a few questions just about familiarity with the ordinances. 37% of respondents said they have used the zoning ordinance, and 30% said they have used the subdivision ordinance. For both ordinances, opinions were pretty split on whether the ordinances were easy or difficult to understand. And so this suggests that even if residents have used the ordinances, they're either not very familiar with them or they have experienced challenges with navigating it, which corroborates some of the questions and comments that we've had so far this morning about overall usability. So we did have a question that provided a list of different land uses, some of which are currently identified and permitted in the ordinance, some of which are not. And the question asked respondents to note whether they would want to allow or encourage with some limitations, or discourage each particular land use. So you can see we pulled out the 4 most encouraged land uses. Folks said they would either encourage them by right or with no or some restrictions. So you can see small-scale commercial development was the most encouraged land use, followed by food trucks or mobile restaurants, outdoor commercial recreation, things like putt-putt or driving ranges, commercial gathering spaces or recreational opportunities, and then outdoor amphitheaters or event venues. And then we've got our most discouraged land uses. By far, data centers were the most discouraged land use. 87% of survey respondents said they would not encourage data centers in the county. This was followed by vehicle tow yards, truck stops, and mini storage or self-storage facilities. We did have a question about community design. We had a couple of statements associated with community design standards and just asked respondents to note whether they agreed, disagreed, or did not have a strong opinion. This was the most supported community design statement at 94% agreeing. Landscaping should continue to be required as a buffer between business and industrial development and agricultural or residential property. And then also very strong agreement for requiring tree cover for business, industrial, and residential developments to preserve character and protect resources. And then the final survey question I wanted to note today, we had a question that noted the comprehensive plan goal of improving and increasing housing supply where appropriate in the county. And so this question just provided a list of different policy options and asked folks to note which they would potentially support as a means of achieving that goal. 39% said they would encourage mixed-use developments. There's also some strong support for allowing assisted living or elder care in more areas. You can see here increasing residential density in designated growth areas and reducing the minimum lot size for residential development were also supported. For the other policy not mentioned, we had 32% fill in something in that row. Most people who filled out this other policy not mentioned said that they would not support any future residential development in the county. We did have a couple of folks suggest some other policy options or ideas that were not listed in the question, but overall, most folks who answered this said no new residential growth. There are several other policies included in the question that are not on the screen, but in no case did the percentage of support for those remaining policies exceed 11%. Again, we're seeing kind of a consistent theme of split opinions on what the future landscape of housing in the county should look like. So that wraps up the survey summary. In the community engagement summary, we have both a question-by-question summary of results And we have the raw survey data included, so you can take a look at all of that. Again, all of that is on the project website for the public as well. We held 4 focus groups across 2 days with some local and regional participants. And these folks just represented stakeholders who are familiar with the development process in the county and are regularly using the ordinance to inform the work. We generally had one individual representing each organization. You can see the full list on your screen. We heard some great feedback from the focus groups. These folks had some pretty specific ordinance changes that they would recommend, or specific processes or aspects that are working well. So those were very helpful to us alongside the other community engagement opportunities. Again, seeing some consistent themes here: preserving rural character, context-sensitive residential and mixed-use development, and user-friendly processes. And in the bullets, you can just see some ideas or thoughts that focus group members had about how those could be addressed or fleshed out through the ordinance. So you can see maybe introducing some new zoning districts, introducing more graphics, retaining efficiency and predictability. Again, some pretty consistent themes and feedback we're hearing from a wide variety of folks. And then last, but certainly not least, we held 2 public workshops that were open to the whole community. One of these was held in person at the middle school, and then the other was held virtually on Zoom. We did get a lot of interest in the virtual workshop, but as you can see, our actual participation was a bit lower than we had anticipated. However, again, hearing very consistent themes from workshop participants, as well as our other community engagement participants as well. So the workshop activities were more open-ended and interactive. One of them focused on using landscaping and buffering as a tool to limit impacts. And then the other focused on identifying appropriate amenities for different types of residential communities. So between our interactive activities, what we heard from questions and discussion, these are kind of the 3 key themes that were consistent across both workshops: context-sensitive buffering, community connection and activity, so using open space, landscaping, and amenities when possible to bring folks together, provide some opportunities for recreation and socialization, and then certainly preserving the sensitive natural resources in the county. We heard a lot about water supply, farms, agriculture, and tree canopy. So I mentioned this briefly earlier, but just want to reiterate that our goal is to make the process as open and accessible as possible, even for folks who aren't able to attend work sessions. This is the project website. It is also linked on the county page. We've been updating it so far with some background information, community engagement events. Again, we've got some answers to FAQs on there. We've got a project progress tracker. And then as we have draft ordinance language, we will be posting that on the website with some comment form or survey for folks to continue to give feedback periodically. And then, of course, anything that we are giving to you all, we will also post that to the website. So this is kind of the one-stop shop for information moving forward. Again, everything will continue to be posted here as the project progresses.
Did everyone get it written down that wanted?
Good question. Yeah, I'll leave it up for one more second in case anyone is still writing it down. I know that was a lot of information coming at you on a Monday morning, but just wanted to be sure that we had the chance to update you on community engagement, update you on your work, and now give you the chance for any final questions or thoughts. So any questions about community engagement, the diagnostic, anything we've talked about today so far? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Edler.
You had 741 results. I know you do these all across the Commonwealth. It's like, for our population, it's probably about less than 3%. Is that typical? of what you normally see across when you do these projects?
That is typical, but I will say that zoning is a very hard topic to get people excited about. Usually for zoning surveys, we are seeing 200-300 responses. By the number of responses, percentage of population aside, this is the highest number of responses that I believe we've ever received for a zoning survey. So pretty strong interest from the community. I'll say, a mass mailer was sent to property owners. It was posted on the website, Facebook, other channels. So hopefully folks felt like they had a fair chance to participate and take the survey. That percentage would probably go up a little bit if you factor children under the age of 18 out of the population, just because adults and property owners were more of the target audience. But again, we also saw some strong interest in the virtual workshop. We had a lot of folks sign up for that. Unfortunately, it didn't translate into participation, but between the number of survey responses, I think it's safe to say that there's a good amount of interest from the community in this project.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I've got
Ms.
a few
Stewart.
questions.
Yes.
So you referenced in the beginning and maybe right before community engagement, the desire for environmentally friendly design. How are you defining that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are kind of two pieces to that. The first is through compliance with the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. Staff is actually working on that now separately from the ordinance. They're working with DEQ staff to get caught up with any of those requirements that have transpired in recent years. So we'll be taking a look at that. But then environmentally friendly design is pretty broad. I think that could look like a number of things. So limiting impervious lot coverage on commercial and industrial districts could be one solution. Increasing the percentage of required open space could be another solution. Having stream corridors or bioswales, pockets for stormwater to run off is appropriate. We're not necessarily talking about requiring everyone to have a green roof or solar panels or things like that. We really want to make sure that we're controlling stormwater runoff, whether that's through increasing open space, requiring more landscaping. Trees can also help with that as well, bushes, especially at commercial and industrial development, preserving tree canopy, maybe having some requirements. So it will probably look different based on whether it is a residential development versus a commercial or industrial development, just because commercial and industrial developments tend to have higher impacts and might have more pollutants associated with them, what have you. And so those are just some of the things that we are considering and will kind of apply based on the project type.
Okay, thank you. And on the Central Virginia Waste Management Authority, one of the things that we talk about with the 9 localities that are members of that organization is when we look at new developments, are they creating spaces for recycling? When we look at new commercial spaces, are they doing that? So that was one of looking to see if that was a consideration, and 2, looking to see if we are considering just beyond complying with the law to actually work to better the environment with what we're doing as we destroy it too. So thank you. And second, you mentioned the focus group. How were the participants selected?
So county staff selected those participants. Berkeley Group had given kind of a general list of very broad recommendations. You might want to have an attorney. You might want to have some property owners, some farmers, developers, architects, surveyors. We gave a very general list. And then I believe staff selected those participants based on, who they are seeing come in with some of the more recent proposals. We had some folks from the Ag Forestal District Committee, so other committees in the county. I don't know if staff has anything to add to that.
Yeah, the focus groups were more of a specific target for folks that we knew were familiar with the ordinances. That way we could get some detailed feedback on specific things. So like Caroline said, staff selected folks that we have seen recent applications from, or engineering firms that we see for commercial, residential growth or projects. Certainly in the rural character group, we selected some ag forest people, Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District, kind of the the regional stakeholder policymakers to help kind of align and give some detailed feedback.
Thank you. And last question, Mr. Chair. For the mass mailer, I think you said that the target was property owners. What data did you use to send that out?
I will defer to staff for that since the county mailed those.
The county used a EDDM postcard mailer, so it should have gone to every address in the zip codes that the postal routes correspond to. There was a delay in production with those, so obviously they were late, and I think we've addressed that since then. But yeah, it should have gone to every address on a postal route.
Okay, thank you. And I know we had talked about previously that it was late, and I think the robust response or the excitement about zoning may be due to other things going on in the county that are not directly related to zoning, and some of the frustration about getting the postcard late. So could you just tell us how long you left the survey open as a result of that?
We left it open for another week and a day. So it was set to close on a Friday. We had set it to close on a following Friday. There was a glitch when it accidentally closed early, but we fixed that within 24 hours. But to accommodate that, we just extended it one more day. And that didn't seem to impact results much. There was still kind of an uptick even after that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair, I have
Yes,
just
go
a
ahead.
comment. So the civil penalties component of this, we're often asked how we're going to enforce things, and I know the sheriff's office gets a lot of calls. So I am glad to see that component added or proposed. How much detail will be in that, like for staff, as far as how to enforce those civil penalties, or is that like a policy that we would make? And how many other localities do that? Is it pretty prevalent across the Commonwealth?
Yes, ma'am. So I'll answer that question first. That is pretty prevalent across the Commonwealth. The locality that I used to work for was moving towards that. They had a lot of issues with enforcement and things getting thrown out in court. Most of the localities that we work with, if not all of them really, are choosing to move towards civil penalties. They're significantly easier and more consistent to enforce. Things are getting enforced evenly. Things are getting thrown out with no recourse or dragged on for months and months and months. And then state code sets parameters for the maximum fine that can be set, the timeframes that, county staff has to give notice to a property owner before they can actually levy the fine. So we typically will just include that language from state code just to make it clear and consistent for everyone. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Well, we certainly appreciate your time this morning and all the information. We have a lot to digest. I know that. So thank you so much.
Yes, sir. This is a big project. Appreciate your time. And we'll be back here hopefully in November with you all to get started on actual policy discussion. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. LaRochelle, do you want to continue or do you want to dismiss your group or what?
You call to adjourn the planning commission for today?
I mean, you're more than welcome to stay. So moved.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Townsend? Aye. Mr. Moyer? Aye. Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Ms. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Rose?
Aye.
Mr. LaRochelle?
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. LaRochelle. Mr. Davis, do you want to dismiss your group?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. By acclamation, we'll adjourn the BZA meeting.
At this time, the Board of Supervisors is going to take a 5-minute break.
Thank you both.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I figured we can just head right out.
Yeah,
Get after it.
sounds good.
I think we're gonna make one big long loop, so
That's nothing.
use the bathroom or anything beforehand.
Yeah, I got it.
That can just do that.
Okay, I'm gonna tell Josh bye.
Thank you, Josh. Take
Yep,
care.
thank you. Thank you, Joe.
go home at night and kind of relax. Getting home and getting in the car and going somewhere.
I'll call the meeting back to order. Next on the agenda is the architectural and engineering agreement for the Fire Station Number 2 construction project. Mr. Rodney Hathaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As you know, for the Fire Station Number 2 project, we're proposing to procure this project using the construction management at-risk method. During this method, the first thing you do is you procure an architect to start the architectural and design. It's our plan to get those plans to about 30% complete, and then we'll bring on the construction management team to help us finish the plans. We have put out to bid an RFP for architectural services, and wow, we had an excellent response. I believe we had 14 proposals submitted, which was above my expectations, and it was an excellent response. We've narrowed that 14 down to, I believe, 4, which we interviewed and met with. And after that process, we evaluated, we evaluated all the proposals, but after interviewing the 4, we evaluated those, and we've selected to contract with RRMM Architects, PC. A great group that gave us what we feel was the best proposal with a not-to-exceed cost of $736,943. You have before you a proposal in your packet. The proposal you have says draft. We were rushing to get to the finish line to confirm everything. So the document that you have actually has everybody's comments on it, our attorney's comments, their final comments, which we all agreed on. So basically, we just accepted all those comments to get to the final draft. I do want to modify the motion as we were rushing to put this together. It's not the standard motion that I would prefer to use. The modification that I would like to add would state that I move to authorize the county administrator to execute the proposed agreement with RRMM Architects PC, and this is the change, in a form approved by the county attorney for architectural and engineering services for the Fire Station Number 2 construction project. And that's our practice. Not only will I execute the agreement, our county attorney would sign off on the agreement as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Any questions from the board members?
Mr. Chair, and I Mr. Hathaway, I think you answered this. The final document has you've accepted all the changes. So where it's like guaranteed maximum price proposal, it says stipulated sum. So there's no more changes. It's a clean version that you'll be executing.
It's a clean version. And remember, this is a not to exceed amount. So we're hoping that it's.
So we don't even need to say that maximum
Right.
price. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's
Mr. Hathaway, will you let the public know which account this funds will be coming from?
Sure. The money has already been appropriated for architectural and engineering, so we've created a account, a line item, project line item for this project, which is titled Fire Station Construction, I believe. But I think the question is where the actual funds coming to fund this account, and it's Colonial Downs revenues is funding this. I think there's a little bit of bond money from a 2016 borrowing that we did, and we had some funds left over from that we're also adding to this.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Any other questions? Then I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Ms. Evelyn.
I move to authorize the county administrator to execute the proposed agreement with RRMM Architects PC in a form approved by the county attorney for architecture and engineering services for Fire Station 2 construction project.
Thank you, Mr. Evelyn. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members?
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Moyer?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Stewart?
Aye.
And Mr. Steers?
Aye. Motion passed. Next on the agenda is the adopt resolution R2526 approving the obligation of photo speed enforcement revenues in the amount of $4,994,578.50. Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. That amount has actually changed slightly. And I'll go over the dollars real quick for the public and for you as well. I know there's a lot of questions regarding the amount of money we've collected thus far. And please keep in mind, there's still one more check that we anticipate receiving for FY26, but we have a good anticipation of, I don't believe we've received that yet, but we've been working with Blue Line, and we have a good idea of how much that check is going to be. So we anticipate FY26 revenues will total $8.7 million, which is more than the 6.4, I believe, that we had discussed at our last meeting. Just to give you a breakdown of the available funding that I have before you today to obligate, at your June 8th meeting, out of that $8.7 million, you obligated $3,437,992. In the FY26 budget, we proposed it, and it was adopted, to use $319,599.97 of that funding in our FY26 budget. In our recently adopted FY27 budget, $195,000 would be used for that. That gives you a balance of unobligated funds of $4.8 million. And that is what's before you today, is to obligate that $4.8 million. Why is it important to obligate that today? Per the state code, monies collected prior to June 30th and obligated prior to June 30th, there's pretty much no restrictions on how those funds could be used. Funds collected after June 30th, 2026, There's only a specific use that they can be used for, and that's traffic enforcement. I do believe transportation is in the language too, but traffic enforcement and transportation, those funds can only be used for that, and what isn't used has to go back to the state of Virginia. So in order to keep that flexibility on the use of those funds, we have to obligate those funds prior to June 30th, 2026. In the resolution that you have, Resolution R-25-26, you have a proposal from staff which also incorporates what we discussed at our June 8th meeting, and that's for $1.9 million to be used as a real estate rebate. We got to that 1.9 number because that's the equivalent of 3 cents on the tax rate. 1.3 million is proposed for the purchase of a fire engine. 1.6 million is proposed for sheriff's office capital expenditures. That's how we get to the 4.8. I also want to add, today we are obligating those funds for specified uses. If this is adopted today, it doesn't mean that departments can just go and start spending money. The next step would have to be, we would have to come back before you, potentially in July, requesting an appropriation for specific uses of this money. So today only obligates. It doesn't mean we can start spending. We would have to come back before you for an appropriation request before funds can be expended. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this real estate tax rebate, does it have to be set up like because we talked about anybody that's already getting any type of break? Is that in this situation, like veteran exempt AFDs?
Yes, we would not include properties that are currently receiving exemptions, AFD, disabled veterans. I think there's one more exemption. Elderly, yes, thank you. Those properties would not receive the exemption.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yes,
Mr. Hathaway, is an obligation to our general fund insufficient? Do we have to further obligate it to a more specific use?
Can I answer that?
So I'm going to have to partner with Benny on this for the exact, I guess, legalese behind it. This is the formal commitment of the board to spend these monies on these particular purposes. If they're not spent on these particular purposes, they become uncommitted and are no longer eligible to be used for non-approved purchases post 7/1. I think I got that correct. But this is your formal obligation, so kind of locking it in for those uses. So we believe that it is within the letter of the law for that. The more specific we can get, the better off we're going to be. Obviously, I think Resolution 28-26 had some very specific items in there. You had the deputies over 5 years, your 3 capital projects, and the stipends to assist the GDC in the administration of the photo enforcement projects. So if we would like to get more specific, I'd be happy to. But I think that the way that it's worded for these items that are in 25-26 R1 are specific enough to maintain what we would need for use.
So the answer to my question then is no. Obligating it to the general fund is not sufficient.
It's not required, but we can get more specific and include that language. But
No, I'm saying more plainly, what I was getting at is, do we need to delineate this specifically today if we have to come back and appropriate it in the future?
No.
So it depends on which item, I suppose. So the rebate itself wouldn't involve a appropriation because it would essentially just be a reduction of revenues. So you wouldn't have to appropriate that portion. The other bits would require an appropriation in the capital fund. But again, that would just then be a reduction of that committed fund balance moved into, active status to be transferred for the capital projects. So I don't know if that answered the question any clearer. I'm sorry.
I think I understand. Okay. And then follow-up question for Mr. Hathaway. At our last meeting, on our resolution for what we did for the Sheriff's Department, wasn't some of what was on that resolution previously included in their capital budget?
Most of it was, but what we essentially did is we switched the funding stream from our capital funds to photo speed enforcement funds.
And are we backing that capital allocation out of their budget? It'll just go back into our general capital fund?
Yes, it will.
Okay. Thank you.
The one thing that we look at 3 cents, would we be talking for a person at a $400,000 house, we're talking about $120 for the year, a one-time check. I know my citizens, I think in District 2, would rather see a few more deputy cars going in front of their house than receiving a $120 check one time. I think, we backed out money, from regular funds. They limited that. Now we have an opportunity to maybe have a few more deputies and paid for 4 or 5 years. Might be another use of the fund besides 1.9 going in a rebate. Sorry to take any money out of anybody's pocket, but that's just the one thing that has come up in my town halls is they'd like to see a lot more sheriff's deputies around.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
not every house is $400,000 in this county, and certainly not in District 3. And District 3 runs 249 all the way, for the most part, a lot of 249. And a lot of my residents are trapped in their driveways when the traffic comes off of 64. And I think most of those residents don't have exemptions. And $120, it wouldn't be $120, it would be less, but that at least makes up somewhat for the inconvenience for however many years this is going to take. There's a lot of residents out there that are not in that income bracket, and I think a lot of them reside in District 3. So I would propose that we go ahead with this.
Mr. Chair, or Mr. Hathaway, can you explain how we would administer a real estate tax rebate and also the criteria, how much people would be getting, and how much it would cost us as a county to send these checks out?
Sure. We're not proposing to send checks out. It would actually be a credit that would be shown on your real estate mailings when we send those out in usually September, your tax bill. You would see that 3% credit on that tax bill. So now we realize that some residents won't realize that credit until next year, because a lot of times if you have a mortgage company that's already paying, we've probably already received the money by then, but you would still get that credit in the following year.
Mr. Chairman, to follow up.
Go ahead.
I did speak with the Commissioner of Revenue, Mrs. Chimovich, and she said that would not be, they could just go out on tax bill, it wouldn't be any additional cost as a credit.
Okay, thank you. I think a credit, and I know that I had shared my thoughts with you all. If I believe we should appropriate this money to the Sheriff's Department, to be clear, but if we're going down this route, it may benefit more citizens in New Kent to do a property tax rebate rather than real estate. Because if you're doing real estate, you're sending money or crediting money to people that may not live in the county. So you may be sending it to the people that own homes on 249, but not the people that live in the homes on 249. So.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. I tend to agree with Mr. Moyer. As the county grows, so does crime. And I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but in the last year, there have been 4 shootings in this county. 4 shootings in New Kent County. you would think that you would hear that every day in Richmond City. And there has been larceny. There has been cases of 11 stolen vehicles. And the Sheriff's Department has responded to 8 break-ins just in the last year. I mean, crime is ticking up, and I think it would be more beneficial for us to have a very sound Sheriff's Department than to have a few extra bucks kicked back to them.
Mr. Chair, the $1.9 million,
Right.
how much more money are we going to collect on these speed cameras that can be used for transportation and traffic enforcement that could be shifted
Well,
out
according
of those funds?
some of the funds going forward, am I right, Sheriff? Will you come forward? The funds can be used for traffic, right?
Moving forward, at post July 1, they can be used for traffic.
It can.
They could.
Right.
So, Mr. Chair, so you could get deputies, traffic cops with that additional money.
It would be specific to traffic-related deputies. It would not be a patrol deputy that has other assigned duties.
But, Mr. Chairman, you said, we needed a sound sheriff's department. I feel like we have a pretty sound sheriff's department. I mean, I think they do a great job. I know you can always need more, but I feel like
We're struggling. We're struggling to keep up with our current call volume.
But I'm saying we've come a long ways in the last 5 or 6 years.
We have, but our calls continue to increase. They're not going down any. And the types of call, the complexity of the call are getting to be more severe type calls. You know, incidents that we've had from larcenies from autos where we have suspects shooting at homeowners. That's not something that we're accustomed to. That's something that we've seen recently over the last few months, and just the violent type of crime that we're seeing. It's not getting better, it's getting worse.
How's, if we, I know we're not appropriating it today, but if that's the real cause, shouldn't we be putting more people on the street instead of, I know you had a $500,000 boat you're asking for in this money, but I feel like if we're going to do that.
Well, if you recall, I asked for 10 deputies, and at this point I've received 6. Yeah. And a part-time. The other equipment, some of the items that we've requested, they've been in our CIP for years. And it's one of those things, and I think the board knows my feelings on this, if the board does move forward with the tax rebate refund out of the photo funds, I would be very disappointed at our board. I do not feel that that is an appropriate use of these funds. And, if we freed up, like it was mentioned, CIP funds that were already obligated to our agency that were given back, they were transferred using the photo funds to fund those items. If the board chooses to provide a rebate or refund out of county-related funds, that's the board's decision. I do not feel it is an appropriate use of photo funds to fund those items. Ultimately, whether it's this board or a future board with these items that have been requested in our CIP, ultimately when they are approved at that point in time, they will come out of our CIP funds that will directly impact our citizens. And at that point in time, a lot of these, because they're bigger ticket items, would require a tax increase at that point in time. And I do also feel that some of the direction from the General Assembly is because of misuse of these funds and how they were appropriated and distributed. And now that's why the General Assembly has become so strict on how they have to be distributed.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
In reading the new information on how things would be looked at after the 1st of July, one of the things is the cumbersomeness and burden that is going to be put on the department in with these tickets. Also, one of the things they're going to be asking for a court date to be put into the summons, which means there has to be, next year, they would have to have 20,000 court dates set aside for things that aren't going to, no one's coming, but they have to set aside these court dates. And that's a cumbersomeness that I think eventually, I think the sheriff and maybe some other people will be coming to us and say, we don't need this. We don't need this problem. So I wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't count on too many dollars after July 1 because I see that one, there'll be another General Assembly next year. That who knows what they do in that year? And two, you may be coming to us and saying you don't have the time or the resources to enforce this.
Mr. Moore, we're still working through some of the language in the current code as far as what it is going to require. As far as the docketing, the 20,000, we're seeing months at times where we've got 20,000 violations. So that's 1 month of violations. And if every case has to be docketed, that's certainly going to be something that the court is going to have to figure out. I will tell you, this was never about generating revenue. This was a direct cause because of the drastic increase we had in crashes, specifically multi-vehicle crashes. That's the reason we're out here on the interstate and conducting this program. And we have seen a significant reduction of crashes, a significant reduction of multi-vehicle crashes on the interstate. Some of the issue that we're starting to see now is all 20 miles is under construction in New Kent County. Only 10 miles has a reduced speed. We're starting to see a lot of crashes in the 10 mile that's under construction that is not at a variable speed. It's currently at the posted speed of 70. They have ordered the equipment. It should be on site, from what I'm hearing, any time. And it will also have the variable speed as the first 10 miles into James City will as well. Ultimately, all three of them will operate independently, so you could have varying speed limits as you go through each of those work zones.
Mr. Chair, I just got a
Yes.
question for Sheriff Bailey. There is a difference, correct, between a traffic deputy and a patrol deputy. Is that correct?
That would be correct. We currently have no traffic deputies.
Right, and
That's all they
After
do.
July 1, we would be able to use money for a traffic deputy, but your need is in positions that you can elevate within your agency as vacancies occur. Is that correct?
Correct. We are trying to fill vacancies. Some of the current issues that we have is an academy starts twice a year. So we have to make sure that our patrol positions are filled before we could ever think about funding traffic units or filling or putting traffic positions out on the road.
Thank you.
So what are we using the funds for after July 1st?
As far as anything that's collected after July 1st, I will certainly be coming back before the board as we try to get some of these. We've got 4 deputies starting the academy the first week of July. We've got some vacancies that people are moving around. Once we figure out all of those, we've got additional hires that job offers that will be coming from a certified officer. So they would have a field training position or process to go through. Once they're up and running, they would take a position on the road. Once the patrol positions are filled, then we would then try to fill the traffic positions.
So we're gonna fund these traffic positions with money that is gonna go away at some point, all of them.
It'll go away ultimately at some point, yes. I mean, the money that you have on hand right now is, I would estimate, probably slightly over half of what's actually owed to the county. The county we have about a 50 to 52% collection rate. So about 48% has not come into the county at this point in time. It's owed to the county, but the
All the patrol
county.
cars could be funded by this money, couldn't it?
All the patrol cars? I think it would have to have a direct, some of the equipment I think could, like a radar could be funded out of it. We could possibly work a camera. One of the unfortunate things is there's really nobody to call. We've got to report things as far as what we've purchased with these funds to the state police, who then in turn will forward that to the General Assembly. And then at that point in time, they will determine whether you made a correct call or you didn't. But at this point in time, there's really no direction other than traffic-related purchases, equipment,
I would
manpower.
think some of this equipment could come out of it. I mean, it's transportation, you said, right? Correct? It can be funded for transportation and traffic enforcement, correct?
A lot of the transportation is infrastructure. You can put bike paths in, you can put sidewalks in, you can build roads, you could design roads. That's a lot of what that funding will go to. I know we're looking at preemption devices for the emergency vehicles that would change signaling. That should be an approved item for that, or from those funds as well.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
I see this as an opportunity, maybe one of our only opportunities, to not use taxpayer funds to satisfy your capital requests. And anything potentially after this, we would be using citizens' money to do it. And this is not, maybe some citizens in New Kent that may or may not live in my house, but majority not citizens in New Kent paying this bill. So that's one of the reasons why I think we should appropriate this to you all, because you're doing the work and it's outside of our citizen tax base. So.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And I can remember several years ago when Wakey Howard was the sheriff, and he came to the board, and he wanted a new radio system for the sheriff's department. And I mean, we were looking at an $8 million investment to replace an antiquated radio system that he had. He came before the board, and the board voted it down. So I called Wakey Howard the next day, and I said, "What's up?" And I've never seen the guy so upset with the county. But I told him, I said, "You went about it the wrong way. You came in there, you was telling the board that you had dropped calls, you had like eggs frying on the calls, you couldn't understand, and stuff like that." I said, "What you need to do is come back to the meeting, bring actual audio so the board could hear that." And when the board heard that, it went from 1 to 4 to 4 to 1. And he was begging for it. And I feel like you're not begging for it, but you are strongly requesting it. Am I right?
Most definitely. And like I said, a lot of these are things that we've been asking for years, whether it's funded today or funded, if it's funded today, we're using these funds, like Ms. Stewart said, it's not going to affect the taxpayer dollar. If it's funded 2 years from now, that's going to affect the taxpayer dollar.
Right.
And like I said, I just don't personally feel that the tax rebate or refund, that these are the appropriate funds to fund that out of. If it's funded out of the CIP, or other funds that the county has, that's the board's decision to make. But our agency is the one that, it's my face that's on this program across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I do not feel that this is the appropriate use of these funds.
Thank you,
What
Sheriff.
about the fire apparatus?
Public safety, I'm all for public safety. Obviously, our citizens expect and need equipment, and whether, again, they're going to pay for it, whether it's paid for out of CIP, using county taxpayer dollars, or funded out of these funds. They're responding to crash calls every day, just like our staff. So I have no objections at all with getting a fire truck, or even a second fire truck. That does not bother me at all. I do feel that would also be an appropriate use.
If I could give one idea on this. So we are basically saying the 1.3 for fire and 1.6 for the sheriff's capital. That we're all agreeing with. It's the 1.9.
Right.
Can we, I could use a better phrase, but can we cut the baby in half?
That don't sound good.
I know it doesn't sound good, but what I'm saying is that can we put part of it towards the sheriff department and part of it to the rebate for the citizens?
We can certainly discuss it.
Idea.
Let's see. Mr. Chair, or maybe Mr. Hathaway or Tripp, somebody. Did we have $1.9 million in photo enforcement funds or close to it when we approved our budget in May?
So in May, we probably had about 6 in revenue that we hadn't quite discussed the use for yet. So it was, I think, maybe briefly talked about at the budget retreat, and those items, kind of the back and forth of how we want to use these funds, whether it was going to be on operating capital, but there was no real direction that we ascertained. So we figured we would wait and have it as a separate conversation outside the budget, because there were a lot of things happening during this budget process as well, to kind of, I guess, give you guys a better time to more clearly focus on this item particularly. But I think that was about the amount there in the beginning of May.
And Tripp, I'd also like to state, when we conducted the public hearing in April, we weren't sure, 100% certain, what the state was going to require of these funds. So we did not include those funds in the budget.
Thank you.
So if this doesn't go to the tax rebate, what's it going to?
Sat down too quick. So if we decided to do what Mr. Moyer is projecting here and kind of move that 1.9 to partial sheriff, partial fire, what would happen is we would get together with the sheriff and the fire departments and kind of work out a spending plan, probably come back to you with a full appropriation for what those items look like. If you had another idea, we could obviously talk about that, but if that seems to be, the item that's getting the most support, that's kind of would be the plan. It may require a public hearing just given the amount, and our last public hearing was to adopt or appropriate in FY26. Obviously, all these would happen in FY27, so we would require a second public hearing, assuming that these items would exceed that 1% threshold, which, given kind of the magnitude of both, I believe that they would.
So we don't know.
Well, that would be up to you all. I believe that they would need to bring forward a proposal. Obviously, we have the 1.3 for the fire engine, which is very specific. So that would be in there, and then I'm not entirely sure what the...
So wouldn't it have to be, since we're not doing anything with it today, wouldn't it have to fall within transportation and traffic enforcement?
No, ma'am. Well, that would be as long as we obligated those funds to the kind of overarching purposes today. So we prefer specificity. We feel like if you say fire capital projects and sheriff's capital projects, that checks the box of being specific enough to show that we made an obligation for a specific purpose. But, if there was something more specific, I know the sheriff has a list of items that he's shared with you. I believe they're included in the packet today.
That's not included in this 1.6?
That is the 1.6, but I'm not entirally sure what would be on top of that.
So more in addition to all of these that are listed?
Yes,
$500,000 boats, $400,000 drones?
Again, I would have to defer to the sheriff for the exact needs outside of what's in the list. I know currently, obviously, we have about 700, I think a little over 700,000 for vehicles. There's always, room for vehicle improvement and replacement. Some other items I'm sure that could be brought up, but I again would have to defer to the sheriff on need and scheduling for that need. And same with fire chief.
It's my understanding those, am I wrong, the sheriff's office capital expenditures, that's for those specific items that are listed today? Or that's not, we have to appropriate that in July, right?
Yes, correct. So it doesn't have to specifically be those items. The sheriff just gave us kind of a brief overview of what would fall under his probable request. I believe the total request was just north of 1.7. We have 1.6 in the original resolution. Obviously, if that number went up, they'd probably encapsulate that full amount plus whatever items he also has in there. I think he removed a couple things from the original ask back in the beginning of June, which was closer to 2.2.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Any other questions, discussions? Anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Resolution R-25-26, approving the obligation of photo speed enforcement revenues in the amount of $4,994,578.50 as presented in the resolution.
I think that figure is going to change.
Well, I think you might be looking at the previous resolution. Oh, wait a minute.
4.8 million.
It's 4.8 million.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. Actually, you read that there's a mistake in the resolution. It references that 4.9 in the title, but in the list of obligations, it's 4.8.
Well, I'll amend it to say 4.8 million then.
Could you repeat? No, excuse me. Go ahead, Ms. Stewart.
I just had a question about process after this. If we approve this, are you going to come back to us with the specifics on a real estate tax credit? Or what happens next?
Yeah, you will not need to appropriate the real estate tax, but we can come back to you with the specifics, the exact amount. We can even give you as much detail as you want on it, even break it down to the lot. So we can provide that, but you will not have to take any further action on the real estate rebate after today. What we will come back to you on is the specifics for the sheriff capital expenditures, we'll come back to you with a plan to spend however much is approved today with specific items and specific costs for each item.
Thank you. I trust the requests listed here for fire and rescue and sheriff's department. I just want to make sure if we're appropriating $1.9 million of non-taxpayer money going back to taxpayers in the county, that it's going to people that live in the county, that are working here every day within the county, suffering the issues that Ms. Pearson talked about, that we are actually using this money to the benefit of the citizens rather than just trying to gain their favor when we're maybe not in favor with them.
Sure.
So, thank you.
That might be difficult if we do it for purely people that live in the county. I mean, we have a spreadsheet with addresses and names, and we have information on if they're receiving credit or not. Tripp, can you?
Yeah, so it will be specific to property owners, but it's difficult. We don't have that record if it's their primary home. To go back to your property tax request, we did look into that. There's a little bit of nuance that goes into property tax. It doesn't go into real estate. Obviously, that's much more protected information. The second bit is that there's the PPTRA bit from 1995 where we receive a certain percentage of credit based on a state revenue figure that goes back to us. Any portion that we would give in a rebate, we'd probably need to speak with the commissioner, readjust that balance. Also, determine which classes are eligible, which classes aren't eligible. Real estate makes it a little smoother. But again, even with the personal property bit, you have folks that are leasing, things like that, that might cause some issues where you wouldn't be giving revenues directly back to folks in the county. So I think you have that issue both ways. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get 100% either way.
So maybe a question, what goal do we achieve by sending money back to people that don't own property, or own real estate in the county?
I would imagine that the majority of them are property owners.
Well, if they're paying taxes and they're on our tax record, they are a property owner and they're paying taxes. They might not live here.
Right, and I understand that, but I know in District 3, most of the Groves own their home. Most of the Arbors, there are some renters in there. But I would venture to say that the majority, live in the house that they own.
Any other discussion? So is someone would like to make a motion? And would you repeat your motion, please, again?
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Resolution R-25-26, approving the obligation of photo speed enforcement revenues in the amount of $4.8 million as outlined specifically on the three things listed in the resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members?
Mr. Moyer?
No.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
And Mr. Steers?
No. It did pass, you're right. All right, is there any other business?
I would like to bring up, and it's not adopted yet, that's why you don't have a resolution in front of you, even though we are working on a draft. There is language in the state budget for localities, any locality, to oppose a 1%, an additional 1% sales and use tax, strictly for the construction of schools. That's legislation that staff has been tracking all through the session. There was a House bill, there was a Senate bill. They didn't make it through, but the Senate bill got added to the budget bill. The budget bill so far is alive. I think there's a few changes that the governor has proposed, and the General Assembly is meeting today, I believe, to adopt the budget. So we'll see what the final language looks like. But I will tell you there's a pretty tight time frame to get that on the ballot for this November. It would require the board adopting a resolution at your July regular meeting. We would submit that to the circuit court and request that the referendum question be added to the ballot. You're not committed to imposing the 1% sales tax by adopting the resolution. You're just requesting the circuit court to add it to the ballot. If it is adopted, you'll then have to hold a public hearing and adopt an ordinance to impose the 1% sales tax. So the resolution is the first step of the process. I will tell you 1% of the sales and use tax for New Kent will bring you just over $4 million annually. That will totally fund the school that was adopted, new school project that was adopted in this year FY27's budget. It will also help us with our financial compliance requirements. Even though they're self-imposed, it would bring us more in line with those. And Davenport right now is working on that information to present to you at the July meeting. You know, one thing that I like about the sales and use tax to fund projects opposed to the real estate tax, the real estate tax I see as a mandatory tax. Everybody has to pay it and they have no control over it. Sales and use tax, you do have more control over what you purchase and how you contribute to the overall revenues. Also, the thing that I really like about that is I would, and this is a guess and I probably shouldn't throw it out there, but I would anticipate that 30 to 40% of that sales and use tax are paid from non-New Kent County residents, and that number might be higher. Yeah. That number may be higher. So now you have people outside of the county contributing to the cost of our infrastructure here in New Kent. So something to think about. I will, depending on actions today or tomorrow, I will probably be requesting, more than likely be requesting to add that as an agenda item for the July meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Any other discussion? All right, the next regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors will be held at 6 p.m. on Monday, July the 13th, 2026. And the next work session will be held at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, July the 28th, 2026, in the boardroom of the County Administration Building. Is there a motion for
Mr.
adjournment?
Chairman, real quick.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd just like to remind everybody, Ms. Pearson and I will be holding a town hall July 9th.
Okay.
And at 6:30 at the Inn Adventure on 249. So look forward to seeing everybody out on the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Evelyn. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer. Ms. Watkins, would you poll the members?
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Moyer?
Aye.
And Mr. Steers?
Aye. Meeting adjourned.